Sarah Chen stood before the towering spires of the Centauri Institute of Advanced Sciences, her acceptance letter projected as a hologram from her wrist device. The crystalline structures seemed to pierce the violet sky of Alpha Centauri B's third moon, their surfaces reflecting the light of two suns. After 3 years of applications, appeals, and qualification tests, she had finally become the first human admitted to the most prestigious physics institution in the known galaxy. A group of Arxelians floated past, their gaseous bodies contracting in what Sarah's translator interpreted as disdain. They'll let any solid matter attend now, one pulse to another. Sarah adjusted her atmospheric suit and straightened her shoulders. She graduated top of her class at Stanford's Xenophysics program and earned this spot. The prejudice of a few gas-based beings wouldn't deter her. The main atrium was a marvel of non-Euclidean architecture, with gravity-defying walkways that seemed to fold through dimensions she could barely perceive. Holograms flickered in hundreds of languages, her neural translator working overtime to keep up. "Welcome, class of 2389. Species identification and planet of origin," demanded a tall, insectoid being at the registration desk. Its compound eyes didn't bother looking up from the quantum interface it manipulated with multiple appendages. Sarah Chen, Earth. The clicking of appendages stopped abruptly. All 4 compound eyes swiveled to focus on her. There must be an error. "We don't admit pre-FTL species to theoretical physics programs." "Check again," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. "My acceptance was signed by the Board of Admissions themselves." "This is unacceptable." The voice boomed across the atrium, causing several energy-based lifeforms to flicker in surprise. Professor Anxveth, the head of quantum mechanics, emerged from a spatial fold. His crystalline body structure refracted light in complex patterns that Sarah's translator interpreted as extreme agitation. "A human," he continued, his voice modulating through frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. "In my department. The species that still thinks quantum entanglement is limited by light speed." Sarah met his gaze, or what passed for it in his crystalline form. "With respect, Professor, that theory was disproven by Dr. Zhang's work on quantum tunneling networks last year." "Ah yes, your primitive attempts at understanding what we mastered centuries ago." Anxveth's body shifted to a deep ultraviolet, a sign of contempt. "Tell me, human, can you even comprehend 11-dimensional calculus?" Sarah smiled. "Would you prefer my answer in standard mathematical notation or Vextall harmonic equations?" A murmur rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. Anxveth's crystalline structure vibrated in what might have been surprise or anger. "You dare." "I dare to learn," Sarah interrupted. "I dare to question. I dare to stand here despite your prejudice, because science doesn't care about species. It cares about truth." "Truth." Anxveth's form pulsed with dangerous intensity. "Very well. You want truth. Your acceptance was a political gesture, nothing more. A way to appease those who think humans deserve a place among advanced civilizations. But I will not allow my department's standards to be compromised." He gestured, and a complex quantum equation materialized in the air between them. "Solve this now, or withdraw your application." Sarah studied the equation, her enhanced neural implants processing the multi-dimensional mathematics. It was a trap, she realized. A seemingly simple quantum mechanics problem that actually required understanding of at least 3 theorems that wouldn't be discovered on Earth for centuries. But Sarah hadn't spent 3 years preparing for nothing. She'd studied banned theoretical texts, networked with underground alien academics, and even reverse-engineered some basic 11-dimensional mathematics. She reached out and began manipulating the holographic symbols, her fingers dancing through the air as she restructured the equation. "Your premise assumes classical quantum limitations," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "But if we apply Dr. Zhang's tunneling principles to the 11th dimension." The equation transformed, simplified, and resolved itself into an elegant solution, one that shouldn't have been possible for a human to discover. The atrium fell silent. Even the gaseous auxilians had stopped their perpetual motion. Ankh-Sveth's crystalline form had gone completely still, refracting light in patterns that Sarah's translator couldn't interpret. Finally, he spoke. "Impossible. You cheated. You must have." "Test me again," Sarah challenged. "Any equation, any theory. I earned my place here, Professor. And I'll prove it every day if I have to." "Oh, you'll prove something." Ankh-Sveth's form shifted to a deep red. "Your acceptance may be final, but your continued enrollment depends on your performance. I will be watching every calculation, every theory, every quantum simulation. One mistake, one failure to keep up, and you'll be returned to your primitive world." As he turned to leave, his final words echoed through the atrium. "Welcome to the Centauri Institute, human. Try not to destroy any fundamental laws of physics during your stay." Sarah watched him disappear through another spatial fold, then turned back to the registration desk. The insectoid being was now watching her with what might have been respect, or possibly concern for her sanity. "Registration completed," it clicked. "Though I suggest you update your will before attending Professor Ankh-Sveth's Advanced Quantum Mechanics class tomorrow." "Already done," Sarah said with a grim smile. "Though I did make one special addition." She leaned closer to the being's audio sensors. "I left my collection of Earth's quantum mechanics textbooks to the Institute's library. You know, for when they need a laugh." As she walked away, Sarah could have sworn she heard the insectoid make a sound that her translator identified as a chuckle. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She had passed the first test, but she knew there would be many more to come. The real challenge wasn't just proving herself worthy of being here. It was proving that humanity itself deserved a place among the stars. Her neural implant pinged, displaying her schedule for tomorrow. Advanced Quantum Mechanics with Professor Ankh-Sveth, followed by 11-dimensional calculus and theoretical xenophysics. Classes that would make the most brilliant minds on Earth struggle to comprehend even the basic concepts. Sarah smiled. She had spent her whole life being underestimated, being told that certain knowledge was beyond human comprehension, being warned about reaching too far, too fast. But that was the thing about humans that these advanced species had yet to understand. Telling them something was impossible only made them more determined to prove otherwise. Tomorrow, she would begin proving that humanity's place wasn't just among the stars. It was leading the way to understanding them. Sarah's first week at the Centauri Institute passed in a blur of quantum equations and theoretical physics that would have made Einstein's head spin. She had expected the academic rigor, but the constant undercurrent of hostility from Professor Ankh-Sveth and many of her classmates was starting to wear her down. Today, Ankh-Sveth announced, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as smug satisfaction. "We will discuss the Heisenberg-Wechsel uncertainty principle across multiple dimensions." Sarah sat straighter in her chair. She had studied this extensively during her preparation, knowing it was a cornerstone of advanced quantum mechanics. "Ms. Chen," Ankh-Sveth's attention focused on her immediately. "Since your species is so acquainted with Heisenberg's work, perhaps you'd like to explain why his original principle fails when applied to quantum systems in the 9th dimension." It was a trap. Sarah could feel the attention of the entire lecture hall focusing on her. Several of her auxilian classmates had already begun pulsing in anticipated amusement. "Actually, Professor," Sarah began carefully, "Heisenberg's principle doesn't fail in the 9th dimension. It transforms." The crystalline patterns of Ankh-Sveth's form shifted to deep ultraviolet. "Explain." Sarah stood, approaching the holographic display at the front of the room. "When we consider quantum systems in higher dimensions, the uncertainty relationship doesn't break down. It reveals new properties." Her fingers danced through the air, manipulating the quantum equations. The 9th dimension introduces what we might call probability cascades, where particle position and momentum exist in a state of stop. Ankh-Sveth's interruption crackled with energy. "You're describing the Wechsel cascade theory, a concept that won't be discovered on Earth for at least 2 centuries. How did you? I derived it, Sarah said quietly, using Earth's current understanding of quantum mechanics and applying it to theoretical models of higher dimensions. The math led me there naturally. The silence in the lecture hall was absolute. Even the energy-based students had stopped their usual ambient glow. Impossible, Ankspeth declared. You expect us to believe that a human independently derived one of the most complex quantum theories in the galaxy. Test me, Sarah challenged. Ask me to prove it. Right now. Ankspeth's form pulsed with what might have been anger or excitement. Sarah's translator couldn't quite tell the difference. Very well. A challenge then. In 1 month, you will present a complete theoretical framework for quantum behavior in the 9th dimension, derived using only principles currently known to Earth science. If you succeed, you stay. If you fail, you leave. And if I do more than that? Sarah asked, an idea forming in her mind. What if I could prove that human intuition about quantum mechanics might actually advance our understanding beyond current galactic theory? The crystalline patterns of Ankspeth's form became chaotic. You dare suggest. I dare to hypothesize, Sarah corrected. Isn't that what science is about? If I can prove that human perspective offers something new to quantum theory, will you publicly acknowledge that humanity deserves a place in advanced theoretical physics? The lecture hall erupted in a cacophony of clicks, pulses, and electromagnetic disturbances as students reacted to her audacity. Ankspeth's form went completely still, his crystalline structure refracting light in complex patterns that Sarah's translator interpreted as a mixture of outrage and intrigue. You have 1 month, he finally declared. Fail, and you not only leave the institute, but your failure will be recorded as proof that humans are not ready for advanced theoretical physics. Succeed. He paused, his form shifting to a color Sarah had never seen him display before. Well, we won't have to worry about that impossibility, will we? As the class dismissed, Sarah remained in her seat, her mind already racing with possibilities. She had studied every quantum theory Earth had developed, but she would need more. Much more. A soft chiming sound caught her attention. Looking up, she saw a peculiar sight. A quantum interface matrix floating unsupported in the air beside her desk. These devices were rare and incredibly valuable, containing vast databases of theoretical physics research. You'll need this, came a voice from nowhere, speaking perfect English without need of translation, and perhaps some help understanding how to use it. Sarah looked around but saw no one. Who? Meet me in Lab 937 after your last class, the voice said. Bring an open mind and your human intuition. You're going to need both. The matrix settled gently onto her desk, its surface rippling with equations that seemed to respond to her thoughts. Sarah smiled. She had expected to fight this battle alone, but it seemed she had an ally, albeit an invisible one. As she gathered her things, she noticed something else. Several of her classmates were watching her with what her translator suggested might be respect. Not many beings would dare challenge Professor Ankspeth so directly. Perhaps she had done more than just accept an impossible challenge. She had shown that humans weren't afraid to stand up for their place in the galaxy. Now she just had to prove they deserved it. Her neural implant pinged with a reminder of her next class, 11-dimensional calculus. But for the first time since arriving at the institute, Sarah felt truly excited. She wasn't just fighting for her own right to be here anymore. She was fighting to prove that humanity's unique way of seeing the universe might be exactly what galactic science needed. And she had 1 month to change everything. Lab 937 turned out to be located in one of the institute's oldest sections, where the non-Euclidean architecture had begun to decay into fascinating geometric patterns. Sarah's atmospheric suit registered some unusual quantum fluctuations as she approached the sealed door. Enter, came the same voice from earlier, still in perfect English. The lab inside was a marvel of organized chaos. Ancient quantum computers hummed alongside modern holographic interfaces, Experimental equipment that Sarah couldn't even begin to identify lined the walls, and in the center of it all stood a being unlike any she'd seen at the Institute. It appeared to be made of pure light, its form shifting between humanoid and geometric patterns. "I am Dr. Lix," it said, its voice emanating from everywhere and nowhere at once. Former head of theoretical physics at the Andromeda Science Academy. Current observer of interesting phenomena. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked, her scientific curiosity warring with natural caution. "Because, Sarah Chen, you've already proven something fascinating." The being's form crystallized briefly into a complex mathematical equation. "You approached ninth-dimensional quantum mechanics like a human." Is that a compliment or a criticism? It's an observation. Dr. Lix's form shifted again. "Advanced species have studied quantum mechanics for millennia. We've mapped every possibility, calculated every outcome, but we've never had a human perspective before." Sarah set down her bag, her attention caught by a holographic display showing her earlier derivation of the Bechtel cascade theory. "You're saying we might see things differently?" "Humans have a unique talent for intuitive leaps," Dr. Lix explained. "Where we see established patterns, you see possibilities. Where we apply known solutions, you question fundamental assumptions. It's why Professor Angsbeth fears you." "Fears me?" Sarah laughed. "He despises me. He fears what you represent." Dr. Lix floated closer. "The possibility that all our advanced knowledge might be incomplete. That a primitive species might offer new insights into the universe's deepest mysteries." The being gestured, and the lab's quantum computers sprang to life, projecting complex equations into the air around them. "Your derivation of the Bechtel cascade theory wasn't just impressive because you reached the same conclusion we did. It's impressive because you got there by a completely different path." Sarah studied the floating equations, her neural implants processing the complex mathematics. "You're saying my human intuition led me to the same destination via an unknown route?" "Exactly. And that's why I believe you might be capable of something even more remarkable." Dr. Lix's form pulsed with excitement. "You could prove that quantum mechanics in the ninth dimension isn't just about probability cascades. It's about something we've never even considered." For the next several hours, Sarah and Dr. Lix worked through theories and equations. The being's vast knowledge combined with Sarah's unique perspective led to several breakthrough moments. But it was when Sarah's neural implant glitched, displaying an equation incorrectly, that the real breakthrough happened. "Wait," she said, staring at the malformed mathematics. "What if we're all wrong about how particles behave in higher dimensions? What if they don't just exist in probability states? What if they create their own dimensional spaces?" Dr. Lix's form went completely still. "Impossible. That would mean that quantum particles in the ninth dimension aren't just uncertain in their position and momentum." Sarah continued, her excitement building. "They're uncertain in their dimensional state. They could be creating and collapsing microdimensions as they move." The lab's quantum computers struggled to keep up as Sarah and Dr. Lix worked to prove the theory. Hours turned into days. Sarah barely attended her other classes, focusing all her energy on developing what they began to call the dimensional uncertainty principle. 2 weeks before her deadline, Sarah had a working theoretical framework. 1 week before, she had mathematical proof. 3 days before, she had something that even Dr. Lix admitted was revolutionary. "This will change everything," the being said, its form shifting through colors Sarah had never seen before. "But Angsbeth won't accept it easily. He'll challenge every assumption, question every calculation." "Let him," Sarah said, reviewing their work one final time. "The math doesn't lie. And neither does this." She held up a small quantum device they'd built, one that could detect the microdimensions created by particles in the ninth dimension. "You understand what this means?" Dr. Lix asked. "If you're right, if human intuition has led to a fundamental breakthrough in quantum mechanics, it won't just prove humanity's worth. It'll force the entire galactic scientific community to reevaluate everything they think they know. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the times she'd been told humans weren't ready for advanced physics. Maybe that's exactly what they need. A reminder that science isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to question everything. As she prepared to leave the lab for the last time before her presentation, Dr. Licks called out to her, "Sarah, there's something else you should know. The reason I really helped you." The beam's form solidified into a nearly human shape. 1,000 years ago, my species was like yours, questioning, intuitive, willing to challenge established theories. But we became so certain of our knowledge that we stopped looking for new possibilities. Don't let humanity make the same mistake. Sarah nodded, understanding the warning. Tomorrow, she would either change galactic science forever or become proof of humanity's limitations. But either way, she would prove that humans never stopped questioning, never stopped seeking new answers. And maybe that was the most important proof of all. The presentation hall of the Centauri Institute was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the human student who claimed to have revolutionized ninth-dimensional quantum mechanics, and it seemed every being capable of interdimensional travel had come to witness either a breakthrough or a breakdown. Sarah stood at the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by floating holographic displays. Professor Anksveth sat in the front row, his crystalline form radiating skepticism. Behind him, the entire institute faculty filled the first several rows, their various forms creating a living tapestry of alien life. "Begin," Anksveth commanded, his voice carrying through the chamber. Sarah took a deep breath, then activated her neural interface. The holographic displays came alive with equations. Traditional quantum mechanics in the ninth dimension. She began. Assumes particles exist in probability states across dimensional planes. But what if we've been looking at it backwards? She manipulated the equations, transforming them into three-dimensional models. We've always assumed particles adapt to dimensional space. But my research suggests something revolutionary. In the ninth dimension, particles create their own dimensional spaces. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several energy-based beings flickered in what might have been agitation or excitement. "Impossible," declared an Arxelian professor. "Such a thing would violate the fundamental laws of." "Only if you assume dimensional space is fixed," Sarah interrupted. She gestured, and a small device floated into the center of the room. "This detector proves otherwise. Watch." The device activated, projecting a real-time visualization of quantum particles in the ninth dimension. Tiny pockets of space appeared and disappeared around them, like soap bubbles in a cosmic wind. "As you can see," Sarah continued, "these particles aren't just existing in probability states. They're creating micro-dimensions as they move. What we've interpreted as uncertainty in position and momentum is actually uncertainty in dimensional state." Professor Anksveth rose, his crystalline form pulsing with intense patterns. "This is absurd. No human could possibly." "Test it," Sarah challenged. "Run your own experiments." "The math doesn't lie, Professor, and neither does direct observation." But as the faculty began examining her equations, something went wrong. The quantum detector started emitting a high-pitched whine, its readings becoming erratic. "What's happening?" someone demanded. Sarah rushed to the device, her neural implants processing the data stream. "Someone's interfering with the quantum field. They're trying to collapse the micro-dimensions." "How convenient," Anksveth said silkily. "Your evolutionary device malfunctions just as we begin to examine it." But Sarah wasn't listening. She was too busy trying to stabilize the quantum field. If it collapsed completely, the backlash could tear a hole in local space-time. Her fingers flew over the controls as she attempted to compensate for the interference. "Stop her," a voice called out. "She's going to cause a dimensional breach." Security drones began converging on her position, but Sarah kept working. She could see the quantum field starting to destabilize. If she couldn't contain it. "Allow me," came a familiar voice. Dr. Licks materialized beside her, its form blazing with energy. Together, they'd managed to stabilize the field just as the security drones reached them. "Interesting," Dr. Lix said loudly, its voice carrying through the chamber. "The interference pattern suggests a very specific quantum signature. One I believe matches the crystalline structure of certain faculty members." All eyes turned to Professor Angsbeth, whose form had gone completely still. "You dare accuse me," he began, but Dr. Lix cut him off. "I dare to observe," the being said, mimicking Angsbeth's favorite phrase. "And my observations suggest someone was willing to risk a dimensional breach, rather than allow a human to advance our understanding of quantum mechanics." The chamber erupted in chaos. Faculty members began arguing, security drones hovered uncertainly, and in the midst of it all, Sarah continued working on her device, making adjustments to prevent further interference. Finally, a new voice cut through the tumult. "Enough." The Institute's director, a being of pure thought and energy, materialized in the center of the chamber. "We are scientists, not politicians. The validity of a theory does not depend on the species of its creator." The director turned to Sarah. "Ms. Chen, your theory will be tested independently by multiple research teams. If it proves correct," the being paused meaningfully, "well, we may need to reevaluate more than just our understanding of quantum mechanics." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah caught sight of Professor Angsbeth being escorted away by security drones. His crystalline form had dulled to an almost opaque gray. "Congratulations," Dr. Lix said softly. "You've done more than prove a theory today. You've shown that progress often comes from unexpected sources." Sarah nodded, watching as faculty members began crowding around her quantum detector, their previous disdain replaced by genuine scientific curiosity. "I just hope they understand what this really means." "Oh," Dr. Lix's form shifted questioningly. "That the universe is bigger than any one species' understanding of it. And maybe the only way to truly comprehend it is to learn from each other." The being's form brightened, a very human perspective, and perhaps exactly what galactic science needs. 3 months after Sarah Chen's controversial presentation, the Centauri Institute of Advanced Sciences had changed dramatically. The Great Hall that had once witnessed her challenge theory now hosted the first interspecies quantum physics summit, with representatives from across the galaxy, including, for the first time, a delegation from Earth. Sarah stood at a window overlooking the quantum gardens, where particles danced in 9-dimensional space, creating the micro-dimensions she had first theorized. Her detector, now refined and mass-produced, had become standard equipment in quantum labs throughout the galaxy. "Contemplating your impact on galactic science," Dr. Lix materialized beside her, its luminous form reflecting off the crystalline windows. "Actually," Sarah smiled, "I was thinking about my first day here, how certain everyone was that humans couldn't comprehend advanced physics." "Ah, yes." Dr. Lix's form shimmered with amusement. "Speaking of which, you might enjoy today's announcement." The Institute's director appeared in the center of the hall, drawing everyone's attention. "Distinguished colleagues, today marks a historic moment in galactic science. Following the independent verification of the Chen-Lix dimensional uncertainty principle, the Galactic Science Council has approved a new initiative." The director's energy form pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as pride. "Beginning next term, the Centauri Institute will open its doors to students from all pre-FTL species who demonstrate exceptional scientific aptitude. Furthermore, we are establishing a new department, Theoretical Innovation, focusing on combining diverse perspectives in scientific research." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah noticed several of her former classmates, including the Arxilians who had once mocked her, nodding in approval. "And to lead this department," the director continued, "we have selected someone who has proven that scientific progress knows no species boundaries. Dr. Sarah Chen, would you step forward?" Sarah froze. Dr. Lix gave her a gentle push. "Go on. You've earned this." As she walked to the center of the hall, Sarah saw faces both familiar and alien, Professor Anksveth's replacement, a young crystalline being who had eagerly embraced her theories. The Earth delegation, beaming with pride. And scattered throughout the crowd, she noticed other humans, prospective students who would no longer have to fight quite so hard for their place here. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "But this position isn't just about me, or even about humans. It's about what we can achieve when we stop limiting ourselves by our preconceptions." She gestured to the quantum garden outside. "Look at those particles, creating their own dimensions, defying our expectations of what's possible. They don't care about our theories or our prejudices. They simply are. And if we want to understand them, to understand anything about this vast universe, we need to be willing to see it through as many eyes as possible." The hall erupted in approving chirps, flashes, and electromagnetic pulses. As the applause died down, Sarah continued, "Our first project will be exploring the implications of dimensional uncertainty in 10 and 11 dimensions. And yes," she smiled, "we'll be questioning everything we think we know about those two." Later, as the summit wound down, Sarah found herself back at the window. Dr. Lix joined her again, along with several of her former classmates. "You've started something remarkable," the Arxillian class president said, their gaseous forms swirling with complex patterns. "We were so convinced we knew everything about quantum mechanics, about humans, about what was possible." "That's the beauty of science," Sarah replied. "The moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop learning anything." "A very human perspective," Dr. Lix noted. "No," Sarah corrected gently. "A universal one. We just needed to remember it." As the twin suns set over the quantum gardens, casting rainbow refractions through the crystalline spires, Sarah watched a new group of students touring the institute. Among them, she spotted several humans, walking confidently alongside their alien classmates. They no longer looked out of place. They looked like they belonged. Because they did belong. Not because they had proven themselves equal to the galaxy's greatest minds, but because they had shown that greatness comes in many forms. That progress requires diversity. That understanding the universe demands as many perspectives as possible. "Ready to change the universe again?" Dr. Lix asked. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the questions yet to be asked, all the theories yet to be challenged, all the dimensions yet to be explored. Always. After all, that's what humans do best. We never stop asking, what if? And in the quantum garden, particles continued their eternal dance, creating and collapsing dimensions, reminding everyone who watched that the universe would always have more secrets to share with those brave enough to question, curious enough to explore, and humble enough to learn. The end.